Welcome 8th grade Wilson Knights to your first semester exam review. I'm glad you guys tuned in. It shows you care about your scores. It shows you care about your grades. That's always a good thing. There's a few things we need to talk about before the video begins. One, we're on time constraints with this program. We can only do 15 minutes, so we will go kind of quick through the examples. So you need to remember two rules, and the first rule is always show your work when you're doing these with me, and try them on your own first, please. Don't just copy down what I'm doing. That doesn't help you out as much. When you get it, I'll tell you when to pause at each question, and you pause and try them on your own first, and then I'll explain them. Alright, go ahead and grab your favorite scientific calculator and some popcorn. Let's begin. Okay, we're going to start with Chapter 2, and we're going to solve some equations. I think this is very important, especially in your future math classes. You're going to use this a lot in math throughout the rest of your life. So we really need to understand how to do these. Go ahead and pause your screen to try this one on your own if you think you know how to do it. And when we come back, I'll explain how you do it. Okay, now this is a multi-step equation, and they're not very creative about how they name those. One-step equation just means we do one step or one operation, and multi-step just means we're going to do more than one operation, so that's why this is a multi-step equation. The first thing we want to do here is we want to look to see if there's any like terms. And now like terms, they have to be on the same side of the equal sign. So like 2x and x would be a like term. And when you combine like terms, since they're on the same side of the equal sign, if we show the equal sign right here, since these are on the same side of the equal sign, you don't have to change the operation. We still use this plus sign in front of the x. So we get 2x plus x, which is 3x, and there's nothing else. We can't combine anything with this 14, and we can't combine anything on this side with the 22, or anything on this side with the 2x. So what we do is we combine those like terms, and we have 3x, and we keep everything else in the equation exactly the same. The next step, all we got to do here is we need to subtract over this 2x right here, because we have a 3x over here, so we subtract 2x. And when we do that, we just get x over here, and we still have the plus 14 and the 22. And then what we need to do is get x by itself, because that's our goal. So we subtract 14 to the other side. We get 22 minus 14, and we get our answer, which is x equals 8. Okay, so sometimes you'll have a word problem like this, and they won't give you the equation that you need to solve. They want you to set up an equation on your own to solve a problem, and that's what we're going to need to do here. Go ahead and read the question, pause, and try to do this one on your own, and then we'll go over it. Alright, the first thing we need to look at is what's this question asking for? Well, it wants to see how many pencils were in a pack, and then we know that's going to be our variable because it tells us right here each pack had X pencils. So if we look down below, I made X our number of pencils in a pack, and it says she bought 5 packs of pencils. So we know there was 5 packs of pencils. So if we had 5 packs with X in each pack, we take 5 times X. That's why we got 5X. And Mr. Worley gave her 3 pencils. So we know we need to add that onto our total. After he gave her 3 pencils, she had 48. So we got 5x, which represents how much she bought, and then we have plus the 3 pencils he gave her equals our total of 48. And you can see here we just worked that out the same way we work out our equations, doing opposite operations. So we got minus 3 to get rid of our plus 3. We get 5x equals 45. Since x is being multiplied by 5, we divide by 5, and our final answer, x equals 9. So there's 9 pencils in a pack. Okay, so on this problem, we're working on an inequality. You have to come up with your own inequality to represent the situation. If you don't remember what an inequality is, make sure you look back in your book or your notes. Go ahead and read this question, pause, and try it on your own. Okay, so we need to think of what symbol would represent this situation, what inequality symbol. If you look up here, we have our symbols. We have less than, greater than, less than or equal to, and greater than or equal to. Well, our situation says he has at least as much money as Mr. Marjoram. So we need to look here and see how T is going to relate to M. Well, if he has at least as much money, that means he could have the same amount as money. Or he could have more money. So the symbol we should have used here is Mr. Thomas is greater than or equal to Mr. Marjoram. Okay, so we got a multiple choice question this time. Make sure you read this over carefully, think about it, and pause your screen and go ahead and try it. Alright, the important part of this problem is that you remember ordered pairs are always written x, y, x value first, y value second. So if we look at these for part A, all you needed to do for each of these is plug in the x value, which was 8 in part A, for x in the problem, and you would see that that does not give you the right y value when you solve this side of the equation. And for part B, doing the same thing, we plug in our 6 for x, and once we solve the equation we should have got our y value of 3, which we did not. In part C, when you plug in 14, we get 2 times 14, which is 28, minus 5, which is 23. So our correct answer here is C, 1423. Okay, next question. Give the slope and y-intercept of the equation that's given. Go ahead and pause your screen and try this out. Okay, the most important thing about this problem is that you remember slope-intercept form, and our slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m is our slope and b is our y-intercept. And if you look at our equation up here, it's actually written in slope-intercept form. Now some people might say, well, why isn't there a plus sign there? Well, if we remember, subtracting is just the same as adding a negative. So if we want to tell you exactly, say what the y-intercept is in our equation, well, it's actually a negative 2, not a positive 2. Because there's that negative sign in front of there, we have to leave the negative sign. So our y-intercept is negative 2. Same with our slope, we have a negative sign in front, and our slope m is negative 12. When it's in this form, just always remember that, the mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. On this one, you can just draw yourself your own graph, your own coordinate plane on the piece of paper you're using. Go ahead and graph this equation. You can pause now and try it on your own. Okay, there's a couple ways we could do this. I'll show you one way real quick, and then I'll show you the other way. First way is using our equation y equals mx plus b. We can see that our slope is 3, and I wrote it as 3 over 1, so we could keep it in rise over run form. Whenever you have a whole number, you can just put it over 1 to show us our run on bottom. And we see our y-intercept is actually negative 2. So first thing we do is we go to our y-intercept, and y-intercept just means where it crosses the y-axis, so we put a dot there, and then we can use our slope to go from that point where it crosses the y-axis. So we know we're going to rise 3, 1, 2, 3, and run 1, and we could keep doing that if we wanted, keep rising 3, running 1, and making points, or we could just stop after the first two. We know it's a linear equation, and it's going to make a line, and then we just make sure to draw our arrows to show that it goes on in both directions. Now I'll show you the other way real quick. Okay, the other way you could have done this is you could have set up an XY table, as you can see I did on the right, and you can pick some easy values. I like to pick easy ones. I usually pick 0, 1, and 2, and those are easy ones to plug in for x. So I plug in a 0 for x up here, and I get negative 2 for y when I solve that equation. So I put the point 0, negative 2. That's actually our y-intercept we found before. And I actually ended up using the same 3 points I used when we did it before. That was just a coincidence. And then I plugged in a 1 for x, and I got a 1 for y. So our point 1, 1 here is on the graph. And then our last point, we plug a 2 in for x, and we get a 4 for y. So I plugged in 2, 4. And that's just another way you can do this. Either way is fine. Okay, so on this one you're going to be writing an equation again for the situation given. Make sure you write the equation, and then it's going to actually have you solve an equation for a certain number of classes that Mr. Thomas is going to take. Go ahead and pause your screen and try this one on your own. Okay, so once again we need to see what the question's asking for and then state what our variables are. So what we need to first do is we need to write an equation for this, and it says our cost is going to be C, which you see we also have down here, and that's going to be for X classes. And so I made X the number of classes he's going to take, and it says make sure to include, that's important, make sure to include the cost for materials. And it said up here that the cost for his tights and his ballet shoes were $15. So we need to make sure to add that into our equation. So first off, it matters how many classes we take, and X is our number of classes, so and it's $12 a class. So that means $12 for each class, so we take 12 times X, and then we need to add on the cost for our materials. So we put 12X plus 15 is our cost. So there's our equation. Now it says find out how much it would cost to take 10 classes. Well, we know we're still going to have to pay for our tights and our ballet shoes here. So we're automatically going to have that plus 15. And it's still going to be the same price for a class. So it's still going to be $12 for a class. But what we have now, the information we have now, is what X is, how many classes we're going to take. And we're going to take 10 of those. So we take 12 times 10 to get the cost for 10 classes, and that's 120, and then we still have to add on our 15 to buy our materials. So when we add on our 15, we get a total cost of $135. Okay, so on this right triangle right here, go ahead and figure out the length of the missing side A. Pause your screen and try this one on your own. Alright, so there's some things you need to think about in this problem. There's a couple parts to it. First off, we need to remember our Pythagorean theorem, and that's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And that's where a and b are our legs of the right triangle, and c is our hypotenuse. Remember the hypotenuse, I kind of drew it out here for you, is always across from the right angle, and it's always the longest side of the right triangle. And it's always directly across so it doesn't touch the right angle of the triangle. So we're finding a leg here. A is actually a leg, and if we set up our equation, we get a squared plus 6 squared equals 10 squared, because we know our hypotenuse here and we know one of our legs. 6 squared is 36, 10 squared is 100, and it says a squared equals 64. So I'm done, right? No, wrong. This is where people mess up a lot. They stop at this spot. They stop at a squared equals 64. Well, our leg isn't a squared. Our leg is a. We need to find what a actually is. And to do that, we have to get rid of the squared. And to get rid of a squared, we have to square root. So we get a squared equals 64. And we need to square root both sides. When we square root a squared, that gets rid of the squared. So we just get left with a, which is what we want. Square root of 64 is actually 8. So our answer, A equals 8 centimeters. Okay, so here's our next question. Go ahead and pause your screen, read this, and try to figure it out. Okay, so on this one, what you need to remember is that every right triangle, you can use the Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and you need to remember that the hypotenuse, or c, is always the biggest side. So if this was a right triangle, 11 would be our biggest side. So we could set it up as 6 squared plus 8 squared equals 11 squared. You can see here 6 squared is 36, 8 squared is 64, and 11 squared is 121. Well, 36 plus 64 actually equals 100. So it does not equal 121, which means this is not a right triangle, and you could kind of use this information to make your explanation. Okay, a little bit of probability here. Go ahead and read this one and try to figure it out. Pause your screen right now. Okay, so if we have a regular 6-sided die, I tried my best here, I know I'm not a very good artist, to draw our 6 outcomes. We can get a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6. So her probability of rolling 5, well, there's only one chance out of those 6 to get a 5, so it's 1 out of 6. And her probability of getting a even number, well, there's 3 even numbers out of the 6, so it's 3 out of 6 or 1/2. Probability of getting a 3 or 1 is 2 out of 6 or 1/3, and her probability of rolling any of those is a 6 out of 6 or 1. This is our last